Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Friday, May 31st, 2024. President Joe Biden says it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict, referring to the jury decision in the Donald Trump hush money case. Former President Donald Trump today again called the trial a scam, attacked the judge and prosecutor, and vowed to appeal. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia announces he's changing party affiliation from Democrat to Independent, although he'll still caucus with the Senate Democrats, so they'll still be in the majority. President Biden on the war in Gaza, urging Hamas to accept the new roadmap to end the fighting he said has been offered by Israel. Phase 1 would last 6 weeks and include a full and complete ceasefire with withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza and release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is asked about the reported change in U.S. policy allowing Ukraine to use U.S. weapons to strike some targets in Russia. Tomorrow starts the Atlantic hurricane season. The director of the National Hurricane Center in Miami talks about what to expect and prepare for. Families of the victims of the Boeing 737 MAX airplane crashes several years ago meeting today with Justice Department officials in an effort to bring Boeing to court and be held criminally liable. And the Super Bowl repeat champions, Kansas City Chiefs, visit the White House. We begin with President Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee this year, talking about the jury in New York City on Thursday convicting former President Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee this year, of 34 counts of falsifying business records in a scheme to cover up a hush money payment to an adult film actress before the 2016 presidential election. President Biden spoke at the White House.
Before I begin my remarks, I just want to say a few words about what happened yesterday in New York City. The American principle that no one is above the law was reaffirmed. Donald Trump was given every opportunity to defend himself. It was a state case, not a federal case, and it was heard by a jury of 12 citizens, 12 Americans, 12 people like you, like millions of Americans who served on juries. This jury is chosen the same way every jury in America is chosen. It was a process that Donald Trump's attorney was part of. The jury heard 5 weeks of evidence, 5 weeks. And after careful deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. They found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 felony counts. Now he'll be given the opportunity, as he should, to appeal that decision just like everyone else has that opportunity. That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict. Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years. And it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that. That's America. That's who we are. And that's who we'll always be, God willing.
President Joe Biden at the White House at the start of his remarks on another topic, the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. We'll have more on that later in this program. At the end of his remarks on Gaza, as the president was leaving, reporters asked him about the Donald Trump trial verdict. President Biden smiled, but did not answer verbally.
Mr. President, can you tell us, sir, Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir? Do you think the conviction will have an impact on the campaign? We'd love to hear your thoughts, sir.
Should he be on the ballot, sir?
Reporters' questions to President Biden at the White House as he was leaving the room. In the video, the president stops, turns, smiles, then turns back and walks out. From ABC News, former President Donald Trump addressed reporters on Friday morning, the day after being found guilty on all 34 counts in his hush money trial, during which he said his legal team would appeal the conviction and repeated claims that the trial was rigged. In a rambling speech, Trump spoke from the atrium of Trump Tower, just feet away from the golden escalator he rode down in 2015 when he kicked off his first bid for president. That was from ABC News. Here's a few minutes of the speech.
So I'm the leading person for president, and I'm under a gag order by a man that can't put two sentences together, given by a court, and they are in total conjunction with the White House and the DOJ, just so you understand. This is all done by Biden and his people. And maybe his people more importantly. I don't know if Biden knows too much about it, because I don't know if he knows about anything. But he's nevertheless the president, so we have to use his name. And this is done by Washington, and nobody's ever seen anything like it. So we have a judge who's highly conflicted. You know what the confliction is. Nobody wants to write about it, and I'm not allowed to talk about it. If I do, he said, I get put in jail. So we'll play that game a little bit longer. We won't talk about it, but you're allowed to talk about it. I hope you do, because there's never been anybody so conflicted as this. As far as the trial itself, it was very unfair. We weren't allowed to use our election expert under any circumstances. You saw what happened to some of the witnesses that were on our side. They were literally crucified by this man who looks like an angel, but he's really a devil. He looks so nice and soft. People say, oh, he seems like such a nice man. No, unless you saw him in action. And you saw that with a certain witness that went through hell. And when we wanted to do things, he wouldn't let us do those things. But when the government wanted something, they got everything. They got everything they wanted. It was a rigged trial. We wanted a venue change where we could have a fair trial. We didn't get it. We wanted a judge change. We wanted a judge that wasn't conflicted. And obviously he didn't do that. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We had a DA who is a failed DA. Crime is rampant in New York, violent crime. That's what he's really supposed to be looking at.
Former President Donald Trump in Trump Tower in New York City. He also spoke about his campaign fundraising since the trial ended.
Now, let me give you the good news. The good news is last night, we just got a report this morning, in the history of politics, I believe, maybe I'm wrong, somebody will find that I'm wrong, maybe, but I don't think so. They raised with small money donors, meaning like $21, $42, $53, $38, a record $39 million in about a 10-hour period. No, think of that. I like those people.
Donald Trump today in New York City. A New York Times article about what happens next in this case reads, Mr. Trump's lawyers can file a notice of appeal after sentencing, scheduled for July 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern, and the judge could stay any punishment during an appeal, something that could delay punishment beyond Election Day. The proceedings will continue even if he wins. Because it's a state case, not federal, Mr. Trump would have no power as president to pardon himself. That was from the New York Times. And one more thing about what happened today at Trump Tower. Donald Trump had posted Thursday night that he would be holding a news conference. He took no questions from reporters. The Biden-Harris 2024 Communications Director Michael Tyler putting out a statement after that reads in part, America just witnessed a confused, desperate, and defeated Donald Trump ramble about his own personal grievances and lie about the American justice system, leaving anyone watching with one obvious conclusion: the man cannot be president of the United States. A Washington Post article quotes Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov at a news conference today, saying, "We do not like it very much when somebody from the outside world says something about the decision of our courts, and we in turn try not to comment. But in general, if we talk about Trump, there is a de facto elimination of political rivals by all possible legal and illegal means. It is obvious. The whole world can see it with the naked eye." U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, was interviewed this morning on Fox News Channel about the verdict in the Donald Trump hush money case.
I'm a lawyer. I was a litigator for 20 years. I was in court with President Trump a few weeks ago to see this for myself. What happened there was outrageous. And you're right. The American people see it. This is a purely political exercise, not a legal one. And everybody knows that. They know intuitively that it's wrong. And the people are outraged. I'm in one of those swing states today. I'm in Ohio and Michigan today. I'll be in Illinois tomorrow. I've been in, by the end of this week, we'll have been in 115 cities in 29 states. And I'm telling you guys, something is happening out there. People see what is going on. They see that the Democrats are so desperate because President Trump is crushing Joe Biden in the polls. They see the Democrat Party and the left so desperate to stop him that they'll risk the destruction of our entire legal system to do it. And that is not hyperbole. That's what's going on here. We broke records on our fundraising platforms last night. We'll continue to do that. We even set up a new website. Go to supportdjt.com because that's how us in Congress, members in Congress, are going to help stand with him and defend this and make sure the right verdict is rendered November 5th. That's the American people's verdict.
So, Mr. Speaker, if I could get you to put your legal hat back on, not as Speaker, but how does this play out? I mean, you got the former president. He's going to appeal this. Do you think that this is going to happen before the election? Most analysts say it's not. Do you think that the Supreme Court has a duty to step in since this will impact, the election? I know we want to act like he's just a normal guy, but he's a leading presidential candidate. The voters should know what's going to happen here. So what do you see playing out in the legal system?
Well, there's a lot of developments yet to come, but I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented, and it's dangerous to our system. I mean, we've all discussed this before, and you all talk about it all the time. This is diminishing the American people's faith in our system of justice itself. And to maintain a republic, you have to have that. People have to believe that justice is fair, that there's equal justice under law. They don't see that right now. And I think that the justices on the court, I know many of them personally, I think they're deeply concerned about that as we are. So I think they'll set this straight, but it's going to take a while. You're right. The process takes a while to play out. The Democrats know that, of course, and they're dragging it out. That was the whole objective. They want to try to bankrupt Donald Trump. They want to diminish his credibility and go after his character. They wanted to keep him off the campaign trail, which they were successful in doing for many weeks. And now they want to call him the convicted felon. This will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time to do it.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on Fox News Channel this morning. From Associated Press, House Republicans announced Friday that they will demand Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo, the lead investigator of the Trump case, appear before lawmakers next month. Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, said that the House Select Committee on Weaponization will hold a hearing with the two witnesses on June 13th. Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, brought that up during an online news conference today.
Yesterday was indeed a demonstration that no one is above the law and that the law is still operating properly in the United States, at least in New York City. Of course, we saw the former president and all his minions, the Speaker of the House and various other people saying it's all a plot. By President Biden. It's a weaponized justice system. We saw that Chairman Jordan, who's unfortunately chairman of the Judiciary Committee, is demanded the presence next week of D.A. Bragg and one of his assistants to testify about this persecutorial prosecution of the president. He will, of course, reject that. But this is a ringing affirmation of the rule of law. The former president has committed so many crimes. He has managed on every other one of his trials of his indictments, I should say, through a strategy of delay, and with the concurrence of the Supreme Court, and with the concurrence of a very pliant judge in Aileen Cannon in Florida, to postpone all these trials to after the election. So it is likely the only trial that will conclude before the election is this one, and it's very important for the American people to know before an election that they're dealing with a convicted felon. So I think this is the importance of what happened yesterday cannot be overestimated. It also shows that our system of justice works, that 12 jurors in a very picked at random, in a very emotional and important prosecution can work well, can go through the evidence and go through the evidence quickly. It's also a testament to DA Bragg and his team that they presented an overwhelming case. The defense, of course, said that you can't depend on the word of Michael Cohen, a demonstrated liar, and of course the prosecution had mountains of corroborating evidence for what Trump said, for what Cohen said, which they introduced before Cohen's testimony, and the jury, which asked to have a key part of that Pecker's testimony from very early on read back to it, was very conscientious and did his job, and we can still depend on the American system of justice, despite the attempts by former President Trump and basically the entire Republican Party at this point to destroy our faith in the American system of justice. We can still believe in it. And it's still true that no one is above the law, and we still have to continue to fight for it.
Congressman Gerald Nadler, Democrat from New York, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, in an online news conference. Story from the Hill. Senate conservatives led by Senator Mike Lee, Republican from Utah, the chairman of the Senate Steering Committee, say they will oppose non-security funding increases that would allow the Department of Justice and other agencies to engage in, quote, partisan lawfare after a Manhattan jury convicted former President Trump Wednesday on 34 felony counts. You're listening to Washington Today. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, writes NBC News, who has spent his entire decades-long political career as a Democrat, said Friday he is leaving the party and registering as an independent, raising speculation about whether he may run for another Senate term or for governor this fall. Despite his party change, Manchin will continue to caucus with Senate Democrats, his office said. Senator Manchin posted a video.
My commitment to my great country has been doing everything I can to make sure that we can survive as a representative form of democracy, a government that we have that the people are in control of, not the party systems. And today, for me to be able to fulfill that, I have changed my registration to being a no-party affiliation independent. My reason for that, I can speak to both sides without having a brand, if you will. The brands have gotten so bad. If you have a D by your name, a Democrat, you're supposed to hate Republicans. If you have an R by your name, you're supposed to hate Democrats. I don't hate either one, and they're not our enemies. Each one are not the enemy. We need to come together as a country, making sure that both parties have opportunities to bring the best ideas to fix the problems that we all face. We can do that, but only as one country. The American brand is the brand that I carry the proudest, and I will always do that. I'm able to do that more by being a registered, no-party affiliate independent than having a D or an R by my name. So I look forward to working with you in the future. I look forward to being involved in trying to help people understand how we can fix a broken system that the political parties have taken control of.
Senator Joe Manchin, independent from West Virginia now, in a video posted on X. And there are now 4 independents in the Senate. The others are Angus King of Maine, Bernie Sanders of Vermont, and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. First time that's happened, at least 4 independents in the Senate since the 76th Congress, 1939 through 41. Story from CNN. President Joe Biden announced Friday that Israel has offered a comprehensive new proposal that provides a roadmap to a ceasefire in the war with Hamas in Gaza and the release of all hostages held by the terror group. He said the proposal was transmitted by Qatar to Hamas. President Biden discussed the 3 phases of the plan in remarks at the White House.
This new proposal has 3 phases. 3. The first phase would last for 6 weeks. Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. There are American hostages who would be released at this stage, and we want them home. Additional, some remains of hostages who have been killed would be returned to their families. bringing some degree of closure to that terrible grief. Palestinians, civilians would return to their homes and neighborhoods in all areas of Gaza, including in the north. Humanitarian assistance would surge, with 600 trucks carrying aid into Gaza every single day. With the ceasefire, that aid could be safely and effectively distributed to all who need it. Hundreds of thousands of temporary shelters, including housing units, would be delivered by the international community. All that and more would begin immediately. During the 6 weeks of phase one, Israel and Hamas would negotiate the necessary arrangements to get to phase two, which is a permanent end to hostilities. Now, I'll be straight with you. There are a number of details to negotiate to move from phase one to phase two. Israel will want to make sure its interests are protected. But the proposal says if the negotiations take longer than 6 weeks, for phase one, the ceasefire will still continue as long as negotiations continue. In the United States, Egypt, and Qatar would work to ensure negotiations keep going. All agreements, until all the agreements are reached and phase two is able to begin. Then phase two, there'd be an exchange for the release of all remaining living hostages, including male soldiers. Israeli forces would withdraw from Gaza, and as long as Hamas lives up to its commitments, a temporary ceasefire would become, in the words of the Israeli proposal, the cessation of hostilities permanently, end of quote. Cessation of hostilities permanently. Finally, in phase three, a major reconstruction plan for Gaza would commence, and any final remains of hostages who've been killed would be returned to their families. That's the offer that's now on the table, and what we've been asking for. It's what we need. The people of Israel should know they can make this offer without any further risk to their own security because they've devastated Hamas forces over the past 8 months. At this point, Hamas no longer is capable of carrying out another October 7th, which is one of Israel's main objectives in this war, and quite frankly, a righteous one. I know there are those in Israel who will not agree with this plan and will call for the war to continue indefinitely. Some are even in the government coalition. And they've made it clear they want to occupy Gaza, they want to keep fighting for years, and the hostages are not a priority to them. Well, I've urged the leadership in Israel to stand behind this deal, despite whatever pressure comes.
President Biden at the White House. Story from The Hill. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has officially been invited to deliver an address to Congress. Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, on Friday sent Netanyahu a formal invitation to speak during a joint meeting of Congress, which featured the signatures of all 4 congressional leaders. They wrote, "We join the State of Israel in your struggle against terror, especially as Hamas continues to hold American and Israeli citizens captive, and its leaders jeopardize regional stability. For this reason, on behalf of the bipartisan leadership of the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate, we would like to invite you to address a joint meeting of Congress." A source familiar told The Hill that the address is expected to take place as soon as the next 8 weeks or soon after August recess. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, writes the New York Times, left open the possibility on Friday that President Biden could allow Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons to strike at a broader array of targets inside Russia, going beyond attacks he has approved on launch sites the Russians are using for their current assault on the Kharkiv area. Secretary Blinken held a news conference in Prague, the Czech Republic, after a 2-day meeting of NATO member country foreign ministers.
The Biden administration has allowed Ukraine to strike targets inside Russia to defend Kharkiv. Do you leave the door open for this decision to be expanded to other cities and targets that are deeper inside Russia? And since it took the Biden administration a while to make this decision, I'm wondering, do you think you were too cautious? Or has your intelligence assessment on the possibility of Putin using tactical nuclear weapons has shifted?
So with regard to the use of U.S. arms by Ukraine and Russia. I said this the other day. The hallmark of our engagement, our support for Ukraine over these more than 2 years, has been to adapt and adjust as necessary to meet what's actually going on the battlefield, to make sure that Ukraine has what it needs, when it needs it, to do that deliberately and effectively. And that's exactly what we're doing in response to what we've now seen in and around the Kharkiv region. Over the past few weeks, Ukraine came to us and asked for the authorization to use weapons that we're providing to defend against this aggression, including against Russian forces that are massing on the Russian side of the border and then attacking into Ukraine. And that went right to the president. And as you've heard, he's approved the use of our weapons for that purpose. Going forward, we'll continue to do what we've been doing, which is, as necessary, adapt and adjust. And that, as I said, has been a hallmark of our engagement. It will continue to be. As I've also said many, many times, we want to make sure that we're proceeding deliberately as well as effectively. So I think time and again, we've adapted, we've adjusted, we've provided Ukraine with the systems, the weapons that it's needed. But again, as I've shared with you many times before, for example, when it comes to weapon systems, we also want to make sure that they have the necessary training to use the weapons and they have the necessary capacity to maintain them. So you have to look at this in a comprehensive way. And I think if you look back, as well as look at what we're doing now, it reflects a very deliberate determination to make sure that we're getting Ukraine what they need when they need it.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at a news conference in Prague. From AP, Germany joined the United States on Friday in authorizing Ukraine to hit some targets on Russian soil with the long-range weapons they are supplying, a significant policy change that comes as depleted Ukrainian troops are losing ground in the war. And U.S. officials, write AP, who requested anonymity to discuss the sensitive matter, stressed that the U.S. policy calling on Ukraine not to use American-provided ATACMS or long-range missiles and other munitions to strike offensively inside Russia has not changed. This from Reuters. The United Nations Security Council will meet publicly on Friday over North Korea's failed attempt to launch a new military reconnaissance satellite, which the United States described as reckless and destabilizing behavior. North Korea said the launch ended in failure on Monday when a newly developed rocket engine exploded in flight. North Korea then fired what appeared to be a ballistic missile, the Japanese government said on Thursday. That was all from Reuters. At today's UN Security Council meeting in New York City, here is Robert Wood, the deputy U.S. ambassador to the UN.
The United States condemns in the strongest possible terms the Democratic People's Republic of Korea's May 27 and May 29 launches using ballistic missile technology in direct violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions. This council has repeatedly called on the DPRK to cease its unlawful weapons program and engage in diplomacy. Yet the DPRK has continued to advance its unlawful weapons program at an alarming rate, having launched well over 100 ballistic missiles since the beginning of 2022. Each of these launches, successful or not, is a flagrant violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Each launch informs the DPRK of its capability gaps and allows Pyongyang to further advance its weapons programs. This council has the responsibility to condemn these launches and to hold the DPRK accountable for its violations. But two council members, China and Russia, continuously block the Security Council from speaking against the DPRK's behavior with one voice and makes us all less safe. The DPRK has also unlawfully transferred dozens of ballistic missiles and over 11,000 containers of munitions to aid Russia's war against Ukraine, prolonging the suffering of the Ukrainian people.
U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations Robert Wood at today's Security Council meeting. And a story from Fox News, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un supervised drills involving the firing of nuclear-capable multiple rocket launchers to show the country's ability to carry out a preemptive attack on rival South Korea, state media reported Friday. Washington Today continues in a moment.
The House will be in order. This year, C-SPAN celebrates 45 years of covering Congress like no other. Since 1979, we've been your primary source for Capitol Hill, providing balanced, unfiltered coverage of government, taking you to where the policy's debated and decided, all with the support of America's cable companies. C-SPAN, 45 years and counting, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The Atlantic hurricane season starts Saturday, June 1st, runs through November 30th. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, says on their website that their National Weather Service forecasters at the Climate Prediction Center predict above normal hurricane activity in the Atlantic Basin this year, with an 85% chance of an above normal season, a 10% chance of a near normal season, 5% chance of a below normal season. NOAA National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan held a news conference at the center in Miami.
We're right on the precipice of what looks to be a very active 2024 hurricane season. So there are a few points I want to emphasize today. We've all seen the seasonal forecast that's come out. It's one of the, it's actually the highest seasonal forecast at the high end of the range of numbers that NOAA's ever issued in May. Forecasting a very busy season, looking, for 17 to 25 named storms, 8 to 13 hurricanes, of which 4 to 7 are expected to become major hurricanes. So a very high chance of a very active hurricane season. But the main message for everybody coming out of this, and as we head into the season, is the preparation has to be the same every year, regardless of what any seasonal forecast says. It only takes one storm affecting you and your community to make it a busy hurricane season. And a few things I want to emphasize in particular is it doesn't take a major hurricane making landfall in your state or in your area or in your locality for there to be major impacts, especially from the water hazards. Rainfall flooding has been the deadliest hazard in tropical storms and hurricanes in the United States over the last 10 years. It's been responsible for more than half of the fatalities. And rainfall flooding is almost entirely unrelated to the strength of a storm. It doesn't matter what category it is, whether it's a tropical depression, tropical storm, or hurricane. All it matters is how long it rains and how hard it rains in a given location for a given amount of time. And again, that rainfall flooding has been the biggest killer. But it's the water hazards in general that we're most concerned about. The combination of rainfall flooding, storm surge, and surf and rip currents are responsible for about 85 to 90% of the fatalities we see in tropical storms and hurricanes across the United States. As we saw in Hurricane Ian in 2022 in Southwest Florida, storm surge still has the potential to kill the largest number of people on any given day of all the hurricane hazards, as we lost more than 40 lives in Lee County from that particular event. Surf and rip currents are an underappreciated hazard in tropical storms and hurricanes. Have actually killed more people than storm surge over the last 10 years in the United States, especially along East Coast facing beaches in Florida, North Carolina, New Jersey. They're susceptible to dangerous ocean conditions that are spawned by hurricanes that might be hundreds of miles away. So again, we want everybody to practice ocean safety. We lose people 1 to 2 at a time, don't get a lot of attention to that particular hazard. But again, you have to know your risk. That's the first step to getting prepared for hurricane season. Know if you live in a storm surge evacuation zone. That forms the foundation of your entire hurricane preparedness plan, because if you are going to be asked potentially to leave your home by your local or state emergency management or government officials, you need to know where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, what you're taking with you, how you're going to get your friends, your relatives, your loved ones out of harm's way. And remember that in many cases, you only have to evacuate tens of miles, not hundreds of miles, to get out of a storm surge evacuation zone to find a shelter, the home of a friend or loved one, or an otherwise safe place to stay.
NOAA National Hurricane Center Director Michael Brennan at the center in Miami today, one day before the Atlantic hurricane season begins. Also at the news conference, the FEMA Deputy Administrator Eric Hook and Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat of Florida. News Nation reported this morning that families of plane crash victims who died in the 2018 and 2019 Boeing MAX jet crashes are set to meet with the Department of Justice on Friday to make their case that the world's largest aerospace company should be held criminally accountable for their loved ones' deaths. The meeting follows years of victims' families fighting for justice since the Ethiopia and Indonesia crashes that killed 346 people. Boeing originally settled with the DOJ in 2021 in a deal that allowed the company to avoid prosecution. The charge was based on the company allegedly deceiving regulators about a flight control system that was implicated in the crashes. However, recent problems could expose the company to criminal prosecution. That was from News Nation. Family members held a news conference after the meeting. Here is Michael Stumo, whose daughter was killed in one of the crashes.
Justice Department has now figured out that they cannot join hands with Boeing and fight the victims in the biggest corporate crime, the corporate crime that's caused the most deaths in American history. We have asked that they prosecute Boeing, that they go after Muhlenberg personally, because so far he gets a big check, goes and gets another gig running a SPAC, which also failed, and he's never had to. The shareholders paid for his mistakes. We want Muhlenberg. He should get prison time for being the lead conspirator in this multi-year conspiracy to defraud the FAA and kill 346 people, including Samuel. We want a sentencing hearing where we get to put on the record all the bad acts of this repeat offender Boeing. Even during the DPA, they were committing frauds in South Carolina, falsifying records that they did tests where they joined the wing and the fuselage. There's dozens of planes affected. They falsified tests that were never done. All the whistleblowers that came in wanted to report safety violations, and their managers forcibly prevented them from doing it.
Michael Stumo, father of a victim who died in a Boeing 737 MAX crash in Ethiopia in 2019, at a news conference today in Washington, D.C. He referred to Muhlenberg, that's Dennis Muhlenberg, who was the CEO of Boeing from 2015 through 19. Also at today's news conference was lawyer Robert Clifford, who said that the Justice Department is being tight-lipped about whether they will move forward with criminal prosecutions. Orlando Sentinel reports after years of delay, another 4 weeks wasn't much of an ask for a pair of NASA astronauts set to finally fly on the first human spaceflight of Boeing's CST-100 Starliner. Butch Wilmore and Suni Williams are set to return to the launch pad Saturday to climb on board the spacecraft, sitting atop a United Launch Alliance Atlas V rocket at Cape Canaveral's Space Force Station's Space Launch Complex 41. On Wall Street, the Dow up 574, NASDAQ down 2, S&P up 42. Bloomberg News writes the Federal Reserve's preferred measure of underlying U.S. inflation moderated in April, and consumers dialed back their spending, supporting plans for an eventual reduction in interest rates. The so-called core personal consumption expenditures price index, which strips out the volatile food and energy components, increased 0.2% from the prior month. That marked the smallest advance of the year, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis data out Friday. That was from Bloomberg. The White House National Economic Advisor Lael Brainard putting out a statement. The cost of living is still too high for many working families, but today's PCE report shows continued progress, bringing down inflation. Annual core inflation is at its lowest level since March 2021, and overall inflation is down 60% from its peak. President Biden is going to keep fighting to lower costs, while congressional Republicans fight to cut taxes for the ultra-wealthy and big corporations. That was the statement from Lael Brainard. From AP, President Joe Biden welcoming the Kansas City Chiefs to the White House on Friday to celebrate the NFL team's third Super Bowl victory in 5 years. The entire team expected to participate in the event on the South Lawn for the second time in 2 years. But AP writes one person not expected was Taylor Swift, the girlfriend of tight end Travis Kelce. But Kelce himself made some remarks.
I'm going to turn it over to Chiefs, but I'd have Travis come up here, but I don't know what to say. Travis, come here.
Fellow Americans, it's nice to see you all yet again. I'm not going to lie, President Biden, they told me if I came up here I'd get tased, so I'm going to go back to my spot.
Kansas City Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce at the White House. Team owner Clark Hunt thanked the team and the fans.
The amazing thing about sports is how they can bring a community together. Over the past few years, the men behind me have elevated the status of Kansas City and united football fans across the country and throughout the world. There's a lot that can divide us today, But for so many of us, sports provide a unifying joy that we all need. I'm incredibly proud of our players and coaches. This season, with a target on their backs, they overcame adversity and got through perhaps the toughest group of playoff opponents in league history. They have etched their names in the NFL history books as just the second back-to-back Super Bowl championship team this century. I'm also incredibly proud of our amazing fans. They have rightfully earned their reputation as one of the best fan bases in all of professional sports.
Kansas City Chiefs owner Clark Hunt at the celebration at the White House. The Chiefs presented President Joe Biden with his own helmet, which the players wanted him to try on, and he did. You can see the video at cspan.org. And thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, Word for Word, and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night and weekend.